Hi guys, and welcome back to Albert Recaps Z Nation for Season 2, Episode 8, The Collector. Oh boy, Murphy gets in a lot of trouble, doesn't he? And in typical Z Nation form, of course, our characters immediately hang a lampshade on it when Murphy gets in trouble. Vasquez, in pure wry Vasquez form, says, "For as a guy as important as this, he sure does get lost a lot." And there was a lot to love about this episode of Z Nation. Many wonderful one-liners like that one. Doc saying, things like, "Oh, we're gonna split up? Man, I hate it when we split up." But really, this isn't a episode that's about the rest of the group. This is a very Murphy-centric episode. And that's a tricky thing to pull off because, as we have noted in the past in this recap show, Murphy's kind of a douchebag. So it kicks off with Murphy and the group. They go off. Murphy, at the very beginning of the episode, he's sort of napping or whatever. They're having banter and talking back and forth. And Doc's like, "Hey, Murphy, let's go and," I think they're going to go look for food. And Murphy wakes up from a little cat nap and he looks at Doc and he sees in Doc's head the brain, like, X-ray vision, sort of in a similar fashion to how a cartoon character might look at another cartoon character on a desert island and see a giant, ham steak. Murphy's all of a sudden seeing brains, and they do make a point to point out, hey, these guys haven't eaten in a while. And Murphy, we get a little glimpse into what happens if Murphy gets too hungry. He actually, in this episode at least it appears, starts to go a little bit Z. He starts to crave the brains. He snaps out of it pretty quickly. He's like, okay, not eating Doc's brain. That's cool. Let's go look for food. They wander off into the forest. There's a great moment of Doc chewing on tree bark. I don't know why I found that so hilarious, but just Doc putting a piece of a tree in his, being that hungry, this is not that good. And Murphy looking at him like, "What is wrong with you, dude? You're eating a tree." But then Doc's like, "All right, well, we're gonna go back. We're gonna get back to the group." Doc kind of comes up to the group and he's like, "Hey, we're back." And they're like, "You're back. Where's Murphy?" And, of course, Murphy has gone off on his own and fallen into a zombie trap. And again, we get, which was an interesting sort of dichotomy, because we see that first they set up hey, he's attracted to brains in a hungry state, which could be significant later, but it also means that it makes sense that he falls into this trap that's made specifically for zombies with brains as the bait. And he falls into this hole, finds another zombie, does his Murphy magic with the zombie, has a few moments of comic relief there, but he's almost immediately accosted by this guy who, as the title of the episode indicates, is a collector of zombies and zombie memorabilia. And the character of the collector is really central to this episode. And it, in my opinion, it sort of straddles the line between working and not working. He starts out really interesting. He's sort of you know that he's gonna be a problem. I mean, just sort of based on how the apocalypse is. But he starts out kind of innocuous. He's just a little bit hyper, a little bit more interested than he should be. He's sort of paranoid about the CDC. He talks, how they did him wrong. He's sort of the classic, dude who got fired and came back with a shotgun, only, the zombie apocalypse happened, so he didn't get to come back with a shotgun, but he's still super mad about the CDC not respecting his work. So he's talking with Murphy, but pretty soon we find out, he's put a shot collar on Murphy, and that's when you really start to see him go a little bit sadistic. And his character, the actor, I think, did a really good job of playing the character as he was written, because he gets this he has this shot collar. He keeps shocking Murphy with it, but he has that weird sort of like, not quite a dual personality. It's not like he's talking to himself, but he's upbeat and he's chipper and everything when everything's going good. And then like when Murphy does something he doesn't want to do, he's like, zap. Kind of like an abusive boyfriend, really. Only, Murphy's the girlfriend in the situation, and that's sort of a weird image. But he has that kind of thing where, like, if you're doing what he wants, oh, he's so nice and sweet and happy, but, like, if you step out of line, oh, man. Like, he's abusive and angry and, like, totally unscrewed. And he gets played a little bit for comic relief, too, because he talks about Comic-Con and cosplayers, and he's sort of, like, looking down on cosplayers, and that element of it kind of works. I keep going back and forth on how much I like this character, because the shocking of Murphy eventually got to be a little one note. At some point, and I think they brought that element in a little bit too soon in the episode. I really would have liked to see him, again, in the sort of style of the abusive boyfriend, develop a rapport with Murphy. If you'd spent more time at the beginning of the episode really building up kind of like, oh yeah, I'm on your side, man, I don't really want you to go to... And he does that, sort of, but it doesn't get enough service in the episode, I think, to really make it effective before he starts zapping Murphy. And by the end of the episode, you're like, I know he has a zapper, somebody take that thing away. But how the episode progresses is that he has this, for lack of a better word, zombie museum. And it is both a museum to zombie media and to the actual zombies that have taken over the world. And one of the things I really like about this character is, so far in this universe, we haven't seen a zombie fan yet. Like, the people, the preppers and the people who think that the idea of a zombie is the greatest thing ever. We know those people exist in our world, and Z Nation very much is sort of about taking place in the zombie apocalypse of our world, right? Like, The Walking Dead, they don't reference other zombie media. In that universe, you've got like, oh, these things just popped up and nobody'd heard of them, and that's an aesthetic that works in a certain way. But Z Nation works in the world where, yeah, we've had years and years worth of media about zombies. We've had movies and TV shows and all these other things that we can reference. And so it's almost a uniquely Z Nation thing in him walking through and giving this very wonderful meta tour of the zombie genre, going all the way back to White Zombie in 1930 something and moving up. And Murphy really playing a really interesting audience surrogate here, because they're giving you kind of a history lesson, but they do it in such a way that he doesn't really feel like they're talking down to you, because Murphy is not really being talked down to. Like, if it's okay, they're sort of saying like, hey, it's okay that you didn't see White Zombie or whatever the second one was, or Day of the Dead, or Night of the Living Dead. Like, you probably saw Day of the Dead, right? You probably saw World War Z. They don't mention World War Z, but, like, we know that that stuff's been a while in the past, and Murphy didn't see it either, so it's cool if you didn't. I thought that was a really deft way of handling that. But it was such a great sort of meta in-universe moment where they're like, hey, this is all the stuff that came before, and explaining all of that to Murphy and the audience and kind of catching us up to how we got here in a fictional sense of how the fiction progressed. And then we find out that the collector, is not only collecting zombie memorabilia, not just movie posters and stuff like that, he actually collects the zombies. Which is, if you don't want to think about that too much, because how did he do it? Like, we haven't seen the blasters except for that one time in that one episode. The one phyto zombie was that one time, and yeah, he happens to have one of each of those. He has several of this special class of zombies that we've seen, even though apparently they're not in his geographical area. Let's not think about that too much. Point being, Murphy's a little bit disturbed by this because, as we've noted in the past, Murphy identifies with the zombies to a certain extent. He doesn't feel like that they're completely mindless monsters. He's sort of attached to them. He feels like, at least like they're kind of like pets to him. And so seeing this guy have these things just on display really bugs him in a way that I think makes it very human. And I talked about a Murphy-centric episode earlier, and I wanted to come back to that because they do a great job of humanizing Murphy here. We've seen him be kind of a monster, right? Last episode, he's all about leaving 10K behind, and really you can empathize with his position, but here with him on his own, being tortured by this guy, even though we know that Murphy's a despicable human being, there's enough humanity there in the way he portrays his character, the actor portrays the character, and also the fact that he's getting cruelly zapped over and over and over again, despite the fact that, again, I felt it went on a little too long. That really sort of puts you on his side. And I'm always fascinated by how that the show walks the line between Murphy's a bad guy, and he is morally a bad person, but setting circumstances up in such a way that you can still root for him as a character. And this episode was no exception to that. Of course, while all this is happening, the rest of the group is looking for him. Not much happening with them other than a few cool one-liners, like I said, with, oh, we're splitting up, and, why do we keep losing this Murphy fellow, and all this other stuff. But, it's a very Murphy-centric episode. We get there's a talk show segment where, and Murphy, to his credit, I think really does the smart thing and downplays his power. He's like, no, I can't control zombies. What are you talking about? That's not, and the other guy's very smart and actually draws him out, leaves him in a room with another zombie that Murphy tries to control to get out, and the guy's like, I gotcha. He comes back in and sort of unplugs the tool that Murphy was going to have the zombie use to cut him loose, which, again, while I felt that the character was a little one note, I've always been fascinated by that idea of, like, characters who are crazy are sometimes portrayed as a little bit stupid. And this guy's not stupid. Like, the fact that he has these zombies trapped at all and hasn't gotten bitten yet tells you that he's pretty far on the ball with being able to handle himself, even if he is completely unhinged about the CDC. But he gets Murphy and shows him through this whole thing. There's the thing with George R.R. Martin, which of course we have to mention. George R.R. Martin as a zombie, wonderful celebrity appearance. With, by the way, if you're the kind of person that likes to dig into, like, when is this happening in the timeline? Is it the future? And by the way, I'm not that kind of person. But the books that he was signing was A Promise of Spring, which I think is like at least 2 books in the future for what the A Song of Ice and Fire series is supposed to be, because I know the next one, I think the next one is supposed to be The Winds of Winter. So I get sort of taking place in the future somehow, but not exactly, kinda. But that was a great fun little cameo with him signing the thing. And of course there's more great meta commentary where Murphy's like, he's the guy asks him to mind control George R.R. Martin to get him to finish the book, and he's like, that's 800 pages. How much longer does it need to be? And they make a quip about killing all the people off, which, by the way, not classy, Z Nation, because you're killing off your characters too. Probably some great, like, little cross-promotional stuff there. But that was some really fun little nods to, things in the universe. And then, eventually, we get to the point where Murphy's trying to get away. He runs into the sort of invisible fence that sets off the shot collar. The doctor's running after him. And 10K comes to the window, and it's a really interesting moment where, 10K's looking in the window, Murphy's sort of under the window, the doc's like, you better not get up, and just like zapping him over and over and over and over and over and over again. Again, got a little word with that. But, it goes to a commercial break right as 10K comes up to the window, and you don't see exactly what happened. But, after the commercial break comes back, the doc talks to him, and he's like, hey, man, there's nothing here. I'm sorry, not Murphy. Did I say 10K's at the window? I can't remember if I said it right or not. But he talks to 10K and he's like, oh yeah, no, I haven't seen anybody. You're keep looking, good job, keep looking for your friend. I hope you find him. And 10K, to his credit, like, does not buy this. He's like, this guy's got, like, he's really well put together. He's acting kind of shifty, so he sort of, like, walks away, and then as soon as the guy's back is turned, like, breaks in and finds Murphy. At which point, you know, we have a really tense moment where Murphy's sort of, like, out of it and almost, you know, delirious because of the doctor's taking his blood. And 10K comes in and tries to save him, but, you know, Murphy's not quite able to muster enough strength, and the zombies are closing on 10K. We have a big, like, really tense scene where, like, oh no, is 10K gonna die? You better not kill him! You do not kill 10K and Murphy in the same episode. Not okay! And then, like, of course, right at the last second, Murphy kind of gets his act together and, like, sends the zombies after the doctor and has a great line where he's like, in my world, there is no mercy. And also a really great moment because, again, in the past episode, we saw 10K and Murphy being at each other's throats. Murphy's still really upset that 10K killed Cassandra. And here, you know, we see that Murphy, or that 10K is willing to still help Murphy out. And that Murphy still doesn't hate 10K. I mean, he has his problems with him, but when he's turning the guy, you know, sicking the zombies on the doctor, the collector, he says, 10K, you know, don't look at this. Don't look at them turning. And I felt that was really interesting because it put a level of humanity back in them. Again, there's that great balance they keep walking between Murphy being a monster, Murphy being human. That's really the hallmark of his character, that he's straddling those two worlds between human and zombie, and also, you know, as an sort of emotional, an emotional state where he's, you know, yes, he's a monster, but he's also a person who has feelings for this group. The doctor's killed, and the group moves on, and that is the end of the episode. I feel like other people may have enjoyed this episode more than I did, but as I mentioned, it wasn't awful. I wasn't like, oh, I hated this episode. But I felt like it had a few weak points, and the plotting was one of those, where there wasn't a lot to happen. It was a lot of the collector showing Murphy around and interviewing Murphy and just getting progressively more crazy. And I would have liked a few more turns in the plot, for lack of a better word. Things happening, you know, changing and shifting and dynamics moving more than just him continually zapping Murphy with the shot collar. But it wasn't a bad episode of Z Nation. It stood up. There was some really great moments. We got some humor back in the show, which we had some last week too, but you know, really like when the show can be humorous. And it looks like next week is gonna go full on crazy bonkers because the group is going to Roswell, and I have no idea what's gonna happen with that. But I would not put it past Z Nation to have aliens be a real thing in this universe, because they're just not, like, they're not scared to do that. I don't know if they will. You understand? There may be some explanation for it, some kind of weird government thing, or, you know, people with advanced stuff. But if I will not at all be surprised if there are actual aliens in the next episode and they become zombified. Zombie aliens might be a thing, but probably not, because we would have seen them if they were. But I can hold out hope. I've got like a whole week for that to be true in my mind, of like zombified gray aliens coming at them. Tune in next time. I'll be recapping this for the rest of the season. Looking forward to see what is coming down the road, and I will see y'all next week with another recap of Z Nation.